What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. We all have to deal with the double-edged sword of early route Pokémon. These Pokémon can be regarded merely as collectibles, usually perceived to be fairly weak, but also gain traction rather quickly, and can often become reliable mainstays on the team if you keep them around. However, with so many Pokémon in each generation, there are a few that would seem like they'd be a perfect fit to be included in the ranks of early route Pokémon, due to a number of factors. Now, I realize that routes do not have infinite space, which is why every Pokémon can't be on the same route. But I think we can go through each region and determine at least one creature that would be a better fit for the Pokémon, and us as players, if they were available at an earlier juncture. There are several elements that lend to being an early route Pokémon, such as evolving at a reasonably low level, since if you got a Rufflet on the first route, it wouldn't evolve until way later, and they usually have to be pretty weak, but not too weak. If, say, Toxel were an early route Pokémon, it would be too much trouble to try and train it the whole time, since it's unable to hold its own until level 30 when it evolves. And for the sake of the discussion, we'll say that early routes refer to anything before the second gym, because you'll rarely have a full team worked out that you'll want to keep around by the time you earn your second badge. So, in Kanto, before you reach Cerulean City, you can get all of the staples you remember from your childhood, and even some less popular options, but there is still a fair amount of choice. So what could possibly be added to all this? Well, arguably nothing needs to be added, but for the sake of the exercise, I would put forth Venonat as the best candidate. This fuzzy bug type could fill the same role as Weedle, but even stronger with the potential to learn Psychic-type moves. And I had taken for granted how good Venomoth could actually be as well, but it can hold its own, so it would be nice to have it before the 5th or 6th gym. See, as it stands, Venonat is only in the lower right-hand corner of the map, which is totally cut off by Snorlax on either side. And you'll probably go straight down the bike path instead of backtracking 3 towns, so odds are that you won't be able to catch a Venonat until after you fight Koga, at which point you likely already have a team set up. So if Venonat could be found a bit earlier, say just to the north of Cerulean, you could actually use it for a meaningful amount of time, and train up a Venomoth of your very own. Oh, that happened in Let's Go? Well, that only proves my point that it should have been like this from the beginning. Because if you don't get one there, the only other place that you can find Venonat is already past the level of evolution, meaning it's basically pointless to try and use one as late as it has traditionally been. Now, in Johto, I was utterly shocked to discover that originally Marill was not found until Mount Mortar. Marill is pretty much the poster child for Johto, or at least one of the most prominent marketing images associated with the region. Up there with the likes of Togepi and Pichu. So it baffles me that in the originals and in the remakes, you can't find a Pika-Blue anywhere until after the 4th gym. And if you decide that you don't want to trudge through an optional cave area at that point, you could miss one altogether. And again, since Marill evolves at level 18, even if you do grab one, you'll spend almost no time with it. That's why it makes so much sense to shift Marill to an early route Pokémon. My vote would be to put it on Route 32 right after Violet City, since it's not overflowing with options, but if you wanted to keep it small, you could just swap it outright for Bellsprout, because we just had a route that you could catch that, and a whole tower devoted to it. You could even make it a super rare encounter if that's what you're worried about, at 5% or something, but just having Marill be obtainable early enough to make a difference is honestly what it seems like it was designed for, but would also go a long way in giving it the clout it deserves. Hoenn is a bit of a different story. There are so many alternate routes at the beginning that have a wide variety of options that you could in fact have a full team by Rustboro, and have some solid alternates by Dewford. So the need is probably least pressing here. But if we are to play the game, I would put forth Swablu as the best one. You can't find this little birdie until going through about 9 towns, meaning you'll have plenty of other flying types that you've seen before, with no real reason to think that you should pick up Swablu other than filling out your decks. and you wouldn't know it could be anything special until after you had beaten Winona. However, if Swablu could be found a bit earlier, you could potentially snag an eventual dragon type and level them up to evolve before you can currently even find a Swablu. Now, some might say that's a bit unreasonable since Swablu evolves at level 35, which can be a bit high for early Pokemon, but it could be another one of those things that we somehow all know about, like Magikarp. If you train up this Pokemon with enough patience, you'll get a dragon. But a major difference is that Swablu isn't nearly as useless as Magikarp, and could actually hold its own on the way to the top, which makes me think that it would be a perfect one to bump up to the first few routes. Again, if we have to. Now, Sinnoh might not have the same bounty in the beginning, but there is a decent spread of Pokemon that you can cultivate before Eterna City. However, in looking at the list, it was painfully obvious that Glameow and Stunky should be early route Pokemon here. Mostly, Glameow and Stunky can be found as early as Route 206, which is right after the second gym, but for some reason Glameow isn't seen until you can surf to Canalave City? First of all, I've never really understood why these two were version-exclusive counterparts in the first place, but I really don't understand why they would make them later than they should. Even if you did get a Glameow, it's right outside of a Steel-type gym, so with the entirety of its level-up attacks being comprised of Normal and Dark, which Steel still resisted back in Gen 4, there's no way you'd bother turning to it for help, and by the time you defeat the gym, you'll probably already have forgotten about it. That's why Glameow needs to be front and center on those early routes. I could see it doing pretty well against all the trainers along the way. Even if it could be found under the bike path like Stunky can, it would be something. But I would prefer if they were both at least obtainable in Eterna Forest. It would have been quite satisfying to have a strong poison type like Stunky be able to help in the grass type gym. Some people might say they can't be early route Pokemon since they don't evolve well into the 30s, but that's no different than certain other Pokemon that you can get relatively early on in Sinnoh. And trust me, you're going to want to spend as much time with your Glameow as you can before it evolves. Which is why it needs to have someone transported across the water and let it roam with the other start of the game pillars. Or at the very least right outside of Valley Windworks. It would be great to get one right when you face Mars for the first time and get thrashed by her Purugly. Many people were shocked at how strong it was, and it made them want to at least try it out, but if you can't find one until half a game later, some of that enthusiasm wears off. The Unova region stands out from any other in that we have seen multiple starting areas in the games, giving us twice the early routes through which to journey, which makes it all the more egregious that Minccino can't be found anywhere among them. To me, Minccino would be perfect for an early route Pokemon. It is a cute little mousy sidekick that you could use for its normal type moves at the beginning, where they would be most effective, or keep it around for the entire journey since it evolves through an evolution stone, which to me only proves its worthiness since other early staples share this, like Pikachu, Skitty, and even Nidoran to an extent. I will never know why you can't find a Minccino until after the 4th gym. Unless you're in White 2, that is, in which case you can find it right before the 4th gym. The middle of the game already stretches the effectiveness of Minccino, since you likely won't want to train a pure normal type to match up the rest of your very diverse team. But if you could find one before then, it's quite possible that many people would give it a chance, and perhaps even fall in love with it to discover a new favorite. But only if it were available at the right time. Kalos was actually a bit harder. Even though there were fewer new Pokemon, several older ones were also brimming out of every route. And while some of those past Pokemon could be beneficial at an earlier juncture, we're focusing on one of the Gen 6 debuts. In this case, I would pick Noibat. Currently in the Kalos region, Noibat is only found in Terminus Cave or Victory Road, which are very late in the game, and it's not like you were going to use one for that Ice-type gym anyway. And even then, they only drop down from the ceiling if you fall into their trap. But I think that could be a good way to regulate Noibat if you wanted to keep it pretty rare and still relegate it to those ambush encounters. But maybe just throw them into an earlier cave or two. Now, Noibat does push the boundaries on the level cap for being somewhat high, But again, it's not like it's as useless as a Magikarp, it's an actual dragon type. Resisting all of the starting types so close to the beginning would help out any team. And all I'll say is that it seemed to work in Alola. You could catch Noibat right after the first trial, and for some people that's the first time they ever got one. Maybe it wouldn't even have to be around the first 2 gyms like the rest of these, but getting Noibat even in the mid-game in Kalos would be an improvement over hoarding it until the end. We mentioned Alola already, and its early areas are also bolstered by numerous past Pokémon. However, there are other new Pokémon locked behind later islands that could benefit from being found a bit earlier. To me, maybe the most in need of help is Togedemaru. Sure, we could go for some Pokémon like Marini, but I'm pretty sure the point of that Pokémon is that they are kind of rare, and you would still have to wait until you got Surf. But Togedemaru is the Pikachu stand-in for the region, so why is it all the way on the 3rd island? Don't answer that, I know why it's actually around the power plant, okay? I get it, but why is that the only place that you can find it? It does make sense to be at Blush Mountain, but there have been other electric types elsewhere in the region. You can find a Pichu on Route 1, which is quite unfortunate for Togedemaru, because many people would opt to keep that Pichu around and try out the new Alolan form of Raichu instead. You can also find Grubbin right from the start, which is an electric type itself, but obviously evolves into one. And if this is the Ultra Games, Charjabug can evolve at Blush Mountain. There's no way you're going to trade out the Roly-Poly Pokemon with your bright and shiny new Vikavolt that you just got in the exact same place. Furthermore, Togedemaru isn't the only electric type even found in the area, with another enticing Alola Pokemon form to try out, and an equal chance to find last generation's Pikachu clone. To me, this is all a perfect storm to ensure that nobody will even try Togedemaru unless it's their favorite Pokemon or something. But if you just put it on Melee Island somewhere, or even on Akala at this point, it would bring Togedemaru out of the shadows and make it far more relevant in its home region. And finally, for the Galar region, I was having some trouble until I once again remembered that Clobbopus existed. This Pokemon is truly shafted compared to others in its peer group, since you can't even find one until Sir Chester Bay on Route 9, which is its own set of problems. Firstly, this comes right after going through Route 8, which means in all likelihood you were unable to stop your curiosity at what Phalanx might be. The answer is it's essentially a Clobbopus in armor times 6, so it makes the little octopus less tempting. But even worse than that, is on the one route in the game that you can even find this rough-and-tumble cephalopod, you find its evolved form first! Before you ever even have a chance to get to the grass and find a Clobbopus, there are multiple wild Grapploct as special encounters in the overworld, and they will not hesitate to run you down. So you could even go through the whole game without ever knowing Grapploct had a previous stage. It's all so backwards, and let's be honest, how many people would go back out of their way to train a Larvitar if they've already caught a Tyranitar? Even if you did want to use one against the Dark Gym just around the corner, why would you choose the weaker one? Not that it matters much, since any wild Clobbopus is already well past the point of learning Taunt, which is how this Pokemon evolves. So level it up once, and it's just another Grapploct like the one you already caught. The whole thing is just a mess, and makes Clobbopus seem insignificant, because the creators couldn't even properly utilize it. But all of this could be cleared up if they simply moved Clobbopus to an earlier stage of the game, which would be especially nice considering the lack of new fighting types that were added in Gen 8. So having one before halfway through the game sure would be great, particularly for Shield players that didn't even have the new Farfetch as an option. All I'm saying is that it never hurts to show off what you've got in a new generation instead of hiding it and acting like you're ashamed. So Clobbopus should definitely be promoted to an early route to give it a little breathing room, and at least some acknowledgement in its native region. So, those are the Pokemon I think would improve themselves and the games as early route encounters. Which Pokemon would you switch to the early routes? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. and we'll see you around next time!